Hi everyone and welcome to this new series of the Data Football Club called Club ID. In this series we will explore the history of football clubs from their beginnings to the present day. I'll also interview a fan of each club who will tell us about their experience as a supporter throughout the video. And of course we will be adding a quantitative flavor to the stories with plenty of fun and interesting stats. The first club of this series is the Hibernian Football Club based in Edinburgh, Scotland, and Ronnie will share with us some great stories as a Hibie.
The 6th of May 1972, Celtic beat Hibs 6-1 in the Scottish Cup final, and that was the day I declared myself openly as a Hibs supporter. So that was my mates thought it was crazy. That's his life.
So let's get the ball rolling. The story of Hibs begins in Ireland. Ireland's population experienced severe hardship as a result of the potato famine in the middle of the 19th century. 1 person out of 8 perished from the consequences of famine, and 1 million people fled for a better life. Amongst this million people that fled, around 13,000 Irish families moved to Edinburgh's Cowgate neighborhood. In order to relieve boredom among the densely populated group of young Irishmen, a local Catholic priest, Father Hannon, founded Hibernian's Football Club in 1875. It became Hibernian later on, but we will come to that. The name Hibernian is a tribute to the home of its founders, as Hibernia stands for island in Latin. Due to anti-Irish feelings, Hibs initially had a hard time getting a game against other Scottish teams. Furthermore, they had trouble registering with the Scottish Football Association, the SFA, and each time they tried, they were turned down. Eventually, Father Hannon's perseverance paid off, and it was none other than the Heart of Midlothian, a nearby team that would soon become their rivals, who agreed to play Hibs on Christmas Day 1875 at the Meadows, Hibs' home ground. This game finally resulted in the Scottish Football Association admitting Hibernian's Football Club. Essentially, Hibs was founded as a Catholic priest philanthropic act helping to support Edinburgh's poor Irish neighborhood. Oh, and in case you were wondering, Hearts won that game 1-0. In the 1880s, Hibs started to make a name for themselves in Scottish football, and by 1883, they were already a well-established football team. Their first great accomplishment was to win the 1887 Scottish Cup, thus becoming the first club from the east of Scotland to win a major title. In November of the same year, another Scottish club was created by Brother Wilfred, an Irish Catholic immigrant in Glasgow, inspired by the success of Hibs. And after inviting Hibs to play multiple times in Glasgow for charity purposes, it occurred to him that launching a football club for Glasgow's Irish immigrants, who were even greater in number than in Edinburgh, would be a good idea. They played their first game in May 1888 with players mostly borrowed from Hibs. This club was named the Celtic Glasgow. Unfortunately, this act of generosity from Hibs would eventually lead to their short-term demise. John Glass, Celtic's financial benefactor, provided financial incentive to Hibs players who were only amateurs at the time. That way, Celtic was able to sign several of them. While Hibs quickly lost their very successful team from the previous seasons, Celtic went on to win 4 league championships in the 1890s. Some Hibs fans still hold Celtic responsible for this demise, while some Celtic fans argue that John Glass was providing stable jobs to Irish football players as football started to become a profession for many players in England and then Scotland. Hibs mysteriously skipped an important meeting that resulted in the establishment of the Scottish Football League in 1890. Because of Hearts and St Bernard's, another Edinburgh football club established in 1878, which were present at that meeting, Hibs were prevented from joining in. Having missed this meeting, Hibs had a much tougher time finding opponents for friendly matches, and the club eventually collapsed in 1891 due to the loss of their lease on their stadium and had to cease operations thereafter. Fortunately, Hibs was reborn in 1892 by acquiring a lease in Easter Road. The new official name became Hibernian FC instead of Hibernians FC and is still the current name of the club today. Actually, the name Hibernians FC now refers to a Maltese professional football club created in 1922. Despite this 1-year interruption, the honours acquired by Hibernians FC are considered as a continuation of the history of Hibernian FC while slowly abandoning the Catholic and Irish communitarism of the early years. It became more a club of north and east of Edinburgh than of a community. Consequently, Hibs joined the Scottish Football League in 1893 and won the inaugural Division 2 championship that year. However, Clyde, which finished below Hibs, were promoted instead. Not sure what happened there, but it is only after winning the league again in the following season that Hibs were able to join the top league in 1895. The year 1895 is actually a great year for the city of Edinburgh, as St Bernard's won the Scottish Cup, Hearts won Division 1, and Hibs won Division 2. Hibs quickly regained success in the following years by winning the Scottish Cup again in 1902 and Division 1 the following year. However, despite these good beginnings, Hibernian did not win trophies in the following decades and was even relegated in 1931 for 2 seasons. The club lived its golden age just after the Second World War, becoming one of the best Scottish and maybe European football clubs. They won the Scottish First League in 1948, 1951 and 1952 and finished second to Rangers in 1950 by just 1 point and second again in 1953 on goal difference. During this time, 5 players cemented their status as legends and made a huge impact on Scottish football. Just saying their name will send shivers down the spine of every Hibs fan. Gordon Smith, Bobby Johnston, Laurie Riley, Eddie Turnbull, and Willie Ormond made up the front line and were called the Famous Five. This name was well earned, as not only they played for Hibs at this time of abundance of trophies for the club, but each of them scored over 100 goals for Hibs. The North Stand of the stadium was named in their honor when it was rebuilt in 1995. I think what makes the Famous Five so special to Hibs fans as well is that only Ormond came at a cost to Hibs with the £1,200 transfer fee from Stenhousemuir. Riley, Johnston, Smith and Turnbull were all recruited at a young age from youth or junior leagues. In 1955, Hibs received an invitation to compete in the inaugural season of the European Cup, even though they only finished 5th in the Scottish League that year. At the time, the European Cup did not strictly depend on league standings, and a total of 18 clubs were asked to take part, all of which had the floodlights required to hold games at night and were thought to attract attention throughout Europe. The first game under the lights at Easter Road was a friendly versus Hearts on October 1954. Funny enough, the English champion of that year, Chelsea, decided not to enter, which made Hibs the first ever British club to enter the European Cup. In their first match, Hibs defeated Rot-Weiss Essen 4-0 at the Georg-Maesche Stadion and drew 1-1 at Easter Road. They beat Djurgardens IF to go to the semi-final, but Stade de Reims, with the French legend Raymond Kopa, defeated them 3-0 on aggregate. In the end, Real Madrid defeated Reims 4-3 in the final. In the 1960s, Hibs frequently took part in the Fairs Cup, the ancestor of the current Europa League, and in this competition, Hibs defeated Barcelona and Napoli in their matches. Apart from these great results, the club did not achieve much in national competitions. However, when Eddie Turnbull, a former member of the Famous Five, was persuaded to take over as manager at Easter Road in 1971, Hibs experienced a second peak. The team, also referred to as Turnbull's Tornadoes, placed second in the league in 1974 and 1975 while also taking home the League Cup in 1972.
The team I followed was Turnbull's Tornadoes, which just so happened to be the best team, as far as I'm concerned, that I've ever seen on the pitch. People older than me would argue it's the Famous Five generation, which I'm quite sure is right, but the team I watched was absolutely fantastic. The first success came fairly soon for me. It was the 1972 League Cup final on the 9th of December. I played Celtic again and Hibs won 2-1 with my absolutely best ever goal ever was the Jim O'Rourke, the second goal. Pat Stanton's was a good one, but Jim O'Rourke's diving header was absolutely amazing. And from my angle on the west side, just looking along the goals at Hampden that day was absolutely amazing. I remember that goal in my mind and what it meant to me.
But the most striking memory of Hibernian history certainly happened on January 1st, 1973 in Tynecastle, home ground of the lifelong Edinburgh rival, Hearts.
There was this one here, which to many Hibs supporters is the greatest game in history. That was the 1st of January 1973 at Tynecastle, New Year's Day derby, and as you can see the score was 0-7, 7-0, it was 5-0 at half time. And this is signed by Jim O'Rourke, Alec Cropland, Pat Stanton. Absolutely amazing. And that's a copy of the programme again, signed by these guys. That day will live forever in my brain. Every goal, and I just got in time to see the first goal with Jim O'Rourke being scored because the crowd was that huge. We were in the boys' game at Tynecastle Upper Alp just to see the goal, and that was it. Absolutely amazing. Brilliant day. The
result is still today the largest victory of Hibs against Hearts, 7-0. It is often remembered during the pre-match of derbies, with footage of this legendary game shown at Easter Road on screen. After 1975, Hibs' performances started to decrease, and eventually Turnbull left in 1980, and Hibs were demoted for the second time in their history. In 1981, they were promoted back to the Scottish Premier Division, but the team struggled and didn't make it to European Cup until 1989. In 1990, due to poor managerial decisions, Hibs were in danger of going bankrupt. Hearts chairman at the time, Wallace Mercer, offered to merge both clubs, but but Hibs supporters viewed the plan as more akin to a hostile takeover. Therefore, to advocate for the club's ongoing existence, Hibs fans founded the Hands Off Hibs organization. This was made possible when Sir Tom Farmer acquired a majority stake in Hibs. Despite Farmer's initial lack of enthusiasm for football, the supporters were able to convince him to take charge. Farmer provided funds to ensure that Hibs could recover on the pitch after struggling for the majority of the previous 15 years as Aberdeen and Dundee United's new firm had notable success. The fact that one of Farmer's relatives had assisted in saving Hibs from financial catastrophe in the early 1890s helped convince him to save the club. Hibs had a few successful years in the early 1990s following Mercer's attempted takeover, winning the 1991 Scottish League Cup final and placing in the top 5 in the league in 1993, 1994 and 1995. Hibs were demoted to the equivalent of the Scottish Championship at the time shortly after Alex McLeish was named manager in 1998, although they were quickly promoted back to the Scottish Premier League in 1999. That year, one of Hibs' favourite players of all time, aka Le God, arrived at Hibs. Our dear Frank Sauzet is an Easter Road legend and was voted as Hibs' all-time cult hero in a football-focused poll carried out in 2005. Sauzet particularly enjoyed Edinburgh derby matches against Hearts and was unbeaten in 9 derby games as a player and manager. He scored in the 3-0 Millennium Derby win at Tynecastle, and he also scored a headed goal in a 3-1 win while being knocked unconscious by an opponent's challenge. A golden generation of talented young players included Gary O'Connor, Derek Riordan, Kevin Thompson and Scott Brown arrived at Hibs in the 2000s. These players had significant role as Hibs defeated the old firm to advance to the Scottish League Cup final in 2004. Unfortunately, they lost 2-0 to Livingston in the final. Finally, on the 21st of May 2016 at Hampden Park, something that hadn't happened for 114 years occurred. This is also the day I watched my first full match of the Hibernian FC. Final of the Scottish Cup was about to start with Rangers on one side and Hibs on the other. After only 3 minutes, Anthony Stokes gave Hibs the lead with an extraordinary run and beautiful finish. However, Rangers put the teams level through Kenny Miller before Andy Halliday gave them the lead in the second half. But Liam Henderson, who entered the pitch during the second half, thought otherwise. Around 10 minutes from the final whistle, Henderson took a perfect corner kick which enabled Anthony Stokes to equalize with a header. And just on the verge of the end of added time, Henderson took the ball again from the corner and Captain David Gray met his cross by heading the ball in to bring the trophy back to Leith.
21st of May 2016, that was an absolutely fantastic day. All my time as a Hibs supporter, the Scottish Cup was a thing that we could never win. It took us 114 years to win that cup. And just so happens I have David Gray's top here signed, number 2, and also Dan McGregor, who was in the Scottish Cup winning team, signed as well. So very proud of these.
The following day, more than 150,000 people lined the streets of Edinburgh to celebrate as an open-top bus carried the trophy. One fun fact about this story is that Anthony Stokes was actually on loan from Celtic that year, and I cannot help but think that it's such a nice irony that it's a Celtic player who scored 2 goals in the final against their lifelong enemy, but also that it seems like it's a tradition since their foundation that Hibs and Celtic exchange good players to achieve great things. Now, let's have a look at Hibs' trophy room. The track record of Hibs involves many different competitions along their 147 years of existence. For the most prestigious trophies, Hibs won 4 Scotland Premierships, 3 Scottish Cups and 3 League Cups.
There's 3 times Hibs have won the Scottish League Cup, and that was the one in 1972. Pat Stanton, captain, lifting the cup. That was an absolute amazing team for me.
In addition, Hibs won the Scottish Championship, so the National Second Division, 6 times. The first 2 times were in 1894 and 1895 when Hibs originally joined the Scottish Football League. After 40 years in the elite, Hibs got relegated for the first time in 1931 and won the Scottish Championship shortly afterwards in 1933. They won it again 3 more times with the last win in 2017 after 3 seasons in the Scottish Championship, their longest time period not being in the Premiership. Hibs entered various other competitions throughout its history and won quite a lot of them. First, the Edinburgh Football League, also called the East of Scotland League, was a competition organized from 1894 to 1908. It was originally created by 4 Edinburgh clubs in 1894, Hearts, Hibs, Leith Athletic and St Bernard's. Only 2 editions occurred between these 4 clubs before Dundee and East Stirlingshire joined the Edinburgh clubs, and the league changed its name to the East of Scotland Football League, which Hibs won in 1902. The Wilson Cup is certainly the competition that most crystallized the rivalry between Hibs and Hearts. The origin of this cup came from Robert Wilson, who was working both for the Edinburgh Edinburgh Evening News Journal and Hearts at the time. The idea was simple, to make the two big clubs of Edinburgh face each other either before or after the regular season, and if it was not possible at these dates, on the 1st of January. The competition took place between 1906 and 1946, with Hibs winning it on 14 occasions. The Southern League Cup occurred between 1940 and 1946 to compensate for the cessation of national football competitions in Scotland because of the Second World War, and in particular the cessation of the League Cup. Its last edition in this form took place in 1946, the end of the war allowing to resume national competitions organised by the Scottish Football League. It was open to members of the Southern League, 16 clubs at first and then 30 in 1945, with former members of the North-Eastern League who stopped in 1945. Essentially it was a tournament with group stages and then knockout rounds. Hibs won it against Rangers in 1944 with the score of 0-0. And no, there were no penalties, so how did they win? Was it a coin toss? No, much better than that. Back then, the winners of the Southern League Cup was the team that had the most corner kicks throughout the final. 6-5 in that case in favor of Hibs. Am I the only one who loves this kind of anecdote? Anyway, let's now talk about the Summer Cup, a competition that Hibs won twice in 1941 and 1964. The Summer Cup existed under two formats. The first one took place between 1940 and 1945, and the second one from 1963 to 1965. In the first format, it was again organized by the Southern League during the war. It took place between May and June when the championship organized by the Southern League was over. The competition was essentially made of knockout rounds. After the war, it ended before being reborn in 1963, this time organized by the Scottish Football League and open to teams of the top division, apart from Rangers and Celtic, who declined the invitation to participate in this competition. This competition did not really gain much success and disappeared in 1965. The trophy was ultimately kept by Hibs, being one of the most victorious teams in this competition, and can still be seen at Easter Road. In 1941, Hibs won 3-2 in the final against Rangers, and the next year, the same opponents faced each other in the final. After ending the game in a draw, Rangers were declared winners after a coin toss. Again, that's so random, but I guess that's what we used to do at the time. Hibs got their second win against Aberdeen after two legs with a cumulative score of 4-4, which led to a final match in Aberdeen where Hibs won 3-1. In terms of international competitions, Hibs reached the semi-final of the first edition of the Champions League, as we said earlier, but they did win one international competition that I'm pretty sure most Hibs fans wouldn't have heard of. It is international as far as football is concerned. It was called the Football World Championship. Sounds like an amazing competition that gathered all the best teams in the world, right? Well, actually, the world literally meant Scotland and England. It kind of makes sense as the only other official football leagues at the time was in Argentina. 4 editions took place in 1887, 1888, 1895 and 1902, and for the two first editions, the winner of the Scottish Cup is the Scottish contender, while for the two last ones, it was the winner of the league. Hibs defeated Preston North End on the 13th of August in 1887 at Hibernian Park. Although there is a track of another game the same year which supposedly also was the Football World Championship between Aston Villa, the winner of the FA Cup that year, and Hibs with a 3-0 victory for the Villains. I guess you can just keep in mind that Hibs won the Football World Championship in 1887. I think nobody will hold it against you. The 10 and 6s was a show ball competition organized from 1984 to 1993 between Scottish elite football teams and occasionally a few English clubs. It is a 6-side indoor football game on a small pitch surrounded by plexiglass. There are 6 subs that can be switched at an unlimited amount of time and at any point in the game. The games lasted 2 halves of 7 minutes and a half for group stages and 10 minutes for each half during the knockout rounds. In 1990, Hibernian won beautifully against St Mirren 3-0 in the final. The East of Scotland Shield occurred from 1875 to 1990 for senior teams. It's the second oldest Scottish football competition after the Scottish Cup. It is also the third oldest in world football that is still played on a yearly basis, behind the Scottish Cup and the FA Cup. It greatly contributed to establishing Hibs and Hearts as the main Edinburgh rivals from its early years. Hibs won 47 editions, while Hearts won 52. To really understand why I think this really helped the rivalry between Hibs and Hearts, no other team won it more than 2 times. During the 90s, the competition was no longer held as an adult level cup due to declining attendance. The youth tournament continued, and in 2004 it was brought back as an annual one-off game between the youth teams of Hearts and Hibs, which served as a fundraiser for the East of Scotland Football Association. To conclude, I'll just quickly mention 5 more competitions which Hibs entered and collected trophies. The Glasgow Merchants Charity Cup, the Rosebery Charity Cup, the Dunedin Cup, the Drybrough Cup, and the North Eastern Cup. Okay, let's now move on to the quiz section of the video, which I'm quite excited about. I'm going to ask you 10 questions, to which I'll give you the answers shortly afterwards, so feel free to pause the video if you want to have a quick think. I'll just say that if you are a true Hibs fan, or if you know very well Scottish football, you should aim for at least 7 correct answers out of 10, and I think I'm being quite generous. First question. I've said earlier in the video that the famous 5 all reached a total number of goals of above 100, but do you know who was the best scorer of the famous 5? Well, it was Gordon Smith with more than 300 goals. Second question, what was the biggest competitive win in history for Hibs? I'm just asking you to give me the opponent, but if you know the score, that's actually very impressive. Well, it was a 15-1 win versus Peebles Rovers on the 11th of February 1961 in the Scottish Cup. Third question, as a symbol of their rivalry, Hibs and Hearts have only one major competition where they won exactly the same amount of trophies. Which one is it? It was the Scottish Premier League that both clubs won 4 times. Fourth question, we always talk about goal scorers, but who has distributed the most assists for Hibs in the last 20 years? I'm not absolutely sure of that one, but I think it's Scott Allen with 34 assists. For the fifth question, I'm gonna ask you which team has a larger stadium capacity currently? Hibs or Hearts? Well, it's a good thing I'm making a video on Hibs because the answer is Easterroad with a capacity of 20,421, while Tynecastle has a capacity of 20,099. So very close. Moving on to the sixth question, now that I've told you the capacity of Easterroad, will you be able to tell me how many people were there on the 2nd of January 1950 to see the Edinburgh Derby against Hearts? There might be a trap here. Well, the answer is more than 3 times the capacity of Easterroad, so 65,860 supporters. I'm not really sure how Scottish people do that, but it's probably how J.K. Rowling got her inspiration for that scene in Harry Potter.
Home sweet home. Excellent.
Moving on to the 7th question. Was it the highest attendance for any match involving Hibs? Not at all, so tell me how many people were there to see Hibs against Rangers on the 27th of March 1948 at Hampden Park. Well, I'm not even sure I'm gonna be able to pronounce the figure correctly, but let's try. It was 143,570 people. I guess stadium capacity does not mean anything to Scottish football fans. More seriously, it was a time where there was no actual stands and people would assemble close to the stadium to try and watch the game. Question 8. Which player yielded the maximum transfer fee a club paid Hibs? There might be a bit of controversy on this one because we don't really know the transfer that was paid to Hibs for Martin Boyle last year, but from the information I gathered, it has to be Scott Brown, who went to Celtic in 2007 for more than £4 million. After losing 4-1 against Napoli, Hibs managed to come back with a 5-0 win on the second leg. And my question is, do you remember who was the legendary goalkeeper who had one of the worst nights of his career that night? Well, it was the great Dino Zoff, the only Italian player to have won both the World Cup and the European Cup, and Hibs put 5 in his net. Last question, who scored the most goals in a single season for Hibs? That's a hard one. Well, it's not a member of the famous 5, it's Joe Baker who scored 42 goals in a single season. That's it for the quiz, so please put in the comment section how much you've got out of 10 and whether you think the questions were too hard or too easy. I'll try to adapt them accordingly for the next episodes. Coming back to Hibs history, let's talk a bit about the logos of the club. Hibs logos had many variations throughout the years, but it is commonly accepted that they have had 4 main different logos. It all started with the harp, a symbol that reminded the Irish community of their homeland, and to me, it really looks similar to the logo of a very famous beer from Dublin. Many variations of this logo were adopted throughout the years, but the second official logo was the football and the crown, introduced in the 80s and was said to be taken as a free inspiration of the Real Madrid logo. The Planet Saturn badge was introduced in the late 80s after it was pointed out that Hibs were using the symbol of the crown without authorization of Real Madrid, and David Duff, who just purchased the club, thought it was time for a rebrand. This new crest was more modern and finally put the historical green colors of Hibs as main colors of the logo. Finally, the current Hibs logo, definitely my favorite, was adopted in autumn 1999. And what's really nice about the creation of this logo is that it came from supporters' suggestions to mark the 125th anniversary of the club. Many songs have been written or sung by Hibs fans over the years, but the most memorable one has to be Sunshine on Leith by the Proclaimers. Yes, you for sure know this band, at least from the song 500 Miles used over and over in How I Met Your Mother. Anyway, Sunshine on Leith is often played at Hibernian FC's home matches at Easter Road Stadium and has become something of an anthem for the club. It's a popular choice for Hibernian fans to sing along during matches and has helped create a lively and festive atmosphere at the stadium. As a short digression, the song's title Sunshine on Leith is also the name of a film that was released in 2013. A film I haven't watched, but according to the description of the movie, it is a musical that features songs by the Proclaimers and tells the story of two soldiers who return home to Leith after serving in Afghanistan. The film is set in the same neighborhood where Hibernian FC is located and features several references to the club. Oh, and before I forget, how can I talk about Hibs without mentioning how they inspired one of the greatest players of all time, Pelé. Pelé himself has credited the famous five as an inspiration for his own career. He has cited their style of play and team spirit as how he defined his own approach to the game, and has credited their influence for helping him to become such a successful player.
Hibs used to go on pre-season tours to South America. Pelé happened to go and watch the team at that time, and he was impressed with the famous five. There is an article, Pelé has a Hibs to thank.
Yes, we'll show that.
Because he took absolute inspiration from what I saw and how they played, the style of football. So I suppose Pelé and Brazil have Hibs to thank. I'm just adding the Brazil part. So.
Let's now have a look at the legendary 11 chosen by the readers of the Edinburgh News Journal and also the Hall of Fame of Ronnie. Between the sticks we've got Andy Gorham, a legendary goalkeeper who is widely considered the greatest Scotland has ever seen. I mean, just look at his nickname, the goalie. How cool is that? This amazing guy joined Hibs from Oldham Athletic in the late 80s and was an absolute star during his time in Edinburgh. He played an impressive 135 games and even scored a goal from inside his own box. And not an own goal, of course. His talent was undeniable, which is why he was snatched up by Rangers in 1991. With them, he won 5 league titles and became a regular for Scotland's national team for over a decade. On the right side of the fence, we've got John Brownlee, who was a no-brainer for this team after receiving more votes than any other player in the fan poll. He's widely regarded as Hibernian's best ever right back, and it's easy to see why. He was an immense talent, and his quality was obvious from the moment he stepped onto the pitch at Easter Road. As a member of the legendary Turnbull's Tornadoes, he made a whopping 322 leagues appearances for the club. A true Hibs legend. Over on the left, we've got Eric Shadler, a super fit fullback who was adored by the fans at Easter Road. Despite some tough competition, he emerged as the clear winner in the fan vote for the best ever left back. The Scottish international brought some serious steel to the Hibernian defense. When he wasn't busy stopping goals, he could be found at the pub in Edinburgh sharing a pint and reminiscing about the glory days with fans. In the center of the defense, we've got John Blackley, who played almost 300 games for Hibernian. He was signed by Bob Shankly in the mid-60s, but really made a name for himself under the guidance of Eddie Turnbull. He was a key part of Turnbull's Tornadoes, and his talent with the ball and his feet earned him the nickname Rolls Royce. He even won a League Cup with Hibs and represented Scotland at the World Cup in 1974. Joining Blackley in the center of defense is Jim Black, who was described by one reader as underappreciated. But based on the fan vote, it looks like he was much more appreciated than originally thought. He was considered as the perfect partner for Blackley. The Ardrey-born defender was renowned for his ability to read the game and time his challenges perfectly, and somehow managed to go his entire career without receiving a single booking. As a defender, at that time, that is quite impressive. He was part of the Hibs defense in the Scottish Cup finals in 1972 and 1975. On the right wing, we've got, of course, Gordon Smith, aka the Prince of Wingers. He is a true fan favorite. They particularly appreciate his flying, tricky, goal-scoring style. And as part of Hibernian's famous five, he helped the club dominate Scottish football in the late 40s and the early 50s, winning the title 3 times, as we've already said. He also earned 19 caps for Scotland, captaining the team twice. And on the left wing, we've got Arthur Duncan, who narrowly beat out some tough competition from Eric Stevenson and Joe Tortolano to claim his spot in the ultimate Hibs 11. One reader called him the most consistent of the 3, and it's easy to see why. Duncan was signed from Partick Thistle for a bargain, £30,000, and his speed on the pitch was unmatched. He had numerous talents and is fondly remembered for his 2 goals in an incredible 7-0 win over the rivals' Hearts. In the center of midfield, we've got Pat Stanton, who was a rock for Hibernian. This tough-tackling midfielder was a key part of the team's success in the 70s and was even voted Player of the Year by the fans in 1971. He made over 500 appearances for the club and even captained them to a Scottish Cup win in 1972. Joining Stanton in the midfield is the legendary Eddie Turnbull, who was a player, manager and all-around club legend. Up front, we've got Laurie Riley, who was one of the most prolific goal scorers in Hibernian history. He scored over 200 goals for the club and even represented Scotland at the World Cup in 1954. He was known for his clinical finish and his ability to score from any position. And rounding out the starting lineup is Joe Baker, who was a powerful forward with an eye for goal. He scored over 100 goals for Hibernian and was even the top scorer in the Scottish League in 1959. He also represented Scotland at the highest level, scoring 8 goals in just 11 appearances. There you have it, the ultimate Hibernian 11 as chosen by the fans. It was tough to narrow it down to just 11 players, but these guys certainly deserve their place in the lineup. From the legendary Andy Gorham in goals to the dynamic duo of Laurie Riley and Joe Baker up front, this team has it all. Now, let's hear Ronnie's Hall of Fame.
I would like you to name for me your Hall of Fame, so 5 persons that made an impact on the club throughout the years. It can be a player, can be a manager, an owner, so yeah, here you go.
The first one would be Eddie Turnbull. He was the number 10 in the famous 5 front line, but I knew him, met him as a manager. He was a Turnbull son, when I first became a Hibs supporter. Absolutely brilliant manager, quite a hard man, but fair, I think. And I met him later in life as well. Really nice to speak to him. Pat Stanton, captain of Hibs in the 70s. Just there should be a statue. And he still goes to Easter Road, he's still there, hospitality, right. He's here, I'll stop and speak to him in the street anytime.
Okay, so he's a Hibernian fan, yeah.
Oh, through and through. Yeah. I mentioned Alan Gordon earlier, he was my
hero, yes.
Absolute hero, number 9, Roy the Rover, stuff for me. And then at the end of the 90s, Frank Sosie turns up.
Frenchman,
yes, I won't hold that against him. But he actually he immediately got Hibs. He just understood the club, the culture, the fans, Edinburgh, he loved Edinburgh. And what a player, absolute class.
Right.
Absolute class. And a really nice guy, humble guy.
So that's 4 in your Hall of Fame, just one more to go.
Sir Tom Farmer stepped in and bought the club. So he actually saved Hibs from oblivion, essentially.
To conclude this video, I'm sure that the most perceptive of you have noticed that I have only talked about Hibs' men's team. But Hibernian FC also has a women's team, so this video would be incomplete without them. Officially, the Hibernian Ladies FC was founded in 1999, leading us to believe that it's only recently that women have started playing football in Scotland. Or at least that's what some people would like us to believe. The Hibernian women's team story actually goes way back as the very origin of football. It's very hard to find reliable sources about the origins of women's football, almost as if we wouldn't want to hear about it, but I'm going to try and give you a brief history. During the late 1800s, women started playing football in Scotland, but it was not yet considered a proper sport for women to play. Women's football was pretty much limited to weird folk rituals involving marriage customs. I found records of rituals in Inverness, for example, where single ladies would play a game against married ladies while prospective husbands watched them from the sidelines. Interesting. The Hibernians women's team was formed around that time, but they had to sneak onto the men's pitch to play. They actually did not even have the official name of Hibernian attached to their team. A few years later, women's football became more popular in Scotland and Hibernian's women's team started playing more official matches. The first recorded women's football match happened in 1881 at Hibernian Park in Edinburgh. It was a Scotland versus England international game organized by 2 theatre entrepreneurs. And in case you were wondering, Scotland won 3-0. The teams played again in Glasgow on May 16th in front of more than 5,000 fans. Unfortunately, the match was abandoned due to a violent pitch invasion and the women players were chased by a mob as they left the field. This, along with similar pitch invasions at other games, ended this early attempt to introduce women's football. It's unclear what the pitch invasions were protesting against, but the press coverage of women's football at the time was pretty nasty. They basically thought women were too delicate and weak to play football, and they made fun of the players' appearances and the quality of the game. Still, women's football continued to grow and thrive over the years despite all this negativity. In 1889, there were reports of women's football clubs in England, Scotland and Canada. The women's team from Edinburgh quickly became one of the top teams in the country in the 20s, touring Europe and became one of the first Scottish clubs to play overseas. They even beat a team from the USA. I couldn't find very much information on what happened between now and then, but it seems like despite facing tough times, Edinburgh women kept playing football, and with the official creation of a women's league, a Scottish Women's Cup, and the World Cup in the 70s, the sport entered its professional era. Since 1999, the Hibernian Ladies FC has known a lot of success. In 2007, they went undefeated in the league and won the Scottish Cup, becoming the domestic double champions. They won the league championship 3 times and represented Scotland in the UFA Women's Cup. Unfortunately, they never made it past the first round. In 2010, Hibernian Ladies won the Scottish Women's Cup for the 5th time in 8 years. This was in contrast to the men's team who hadn't won the Scottish Cup for 114 years in 2016. In 2011, 6 Hibernian Ladies players were called up to the Scotland national team. That same year, they beat local rival Spartans 5-2 in the Scottish Women's Premier League Cup final. And they carried on their great momentum by winning domestic cup doubles in 2016, 2017 and 2018. And it was in 2020 that the team was rebranded as Hibernian Women and offered their first part-time professional contracts at last. The senior team was fully integrated into the men's club in July 2022, so very recently, with the youth team still being run by the Hibernian Community Foundation. With that said, I hope that you now better understand the story of Hibs. I've had a lot of fun preparing this video regardless of the hours it took, and I hope I've honored Hibs fans and haven't made too many mistakes. If I did, please let me know in the comment section, and also don't hesitate to put the next club you would like me to cover in this series. Anyway, thank you very much for staying up until that point in the video. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and if you did, please hit that like button and share it to your teammates. And if you want to join the Data Football Club, please subscribe and don't forget to click on the bell icon. See you soon for another video where football's the game and data's the goal. Bye bye!